Hello everyone, it's Martin aka Anders, and if you follow me on Twitter at all, I am delivering on my promise. This is going to be the first installment in a series of videos taking a look at how I dove into Perl on a theoretical level. With that said, this is already going to be long, so less intro, more theory, let's get into it. Before we get into the meat of everything, first I want to cover the technicalities of what we're about to look at. The way we want to approach map abstraction will involve four main elements. The first is owned space, or areas under the static control of one of the teams at the start of the round, think spawns and sites. The next is transitional space. These, as the name implies, are transitional in nature, include rotation corridors and mids, and bridge the gap between owned space and our next category, intermediate space. The intermediate spaces are areas you expect to be extremely heavily contested and represent the last areas you have to scale through pre-exec, your mains, and your links. Our final category is exec space. These are the points of direct ingress to sites, essentially where you're standing before you throw your flash, pop your dash, or swing the site. With terms set for space, we also need to quickly define the map features we'll use to characterize them. Bottlenecks, LOS obstructions, angle density, soft and hard wall dynamics, verticality, and no man's land / traversable space. Most of these are self-explanatory. The standouts are angle density, which is the number of potentially held angles you swing into from a given position, and traversable space, which is essentially just open area and will mostly concern the amount of distance you need to cover. At any rate, let's get this show on the road. We're going to be dissecting the map piece by piece and likening it to other maps. In the next installment of the series, what we do here will serve as the baseline for what utility and agents will be good where, and then we can blend those during our compositional design process. We'll start by simply going left to right, kicking it off with belong. If we take belong, the first thing we want to do is torque it on its side, and then we have a very close analog to Icebox's belong. Critical features include a deep defender biased hold that facilitates a site fallback, a bisected primary corridor, a single-sided point of ingress for attackers, and staggered mid-corridor pockets of imperfect coverage. The most dramatic difference here is obviously the verticality, but that will come up more when we discuss B-Site's exec space later on. Moving on to B-Link, we're right back to Icebox with a B-Link to B-Link comparison. You have a harsh bottleneck ingress, an immediate right side defender position, as well as a deep site-side one, with a stepped primary corridor as the traversable space. Key differences to note here are the fact that Icebox's B-Link has a full second corridor, the verticality, and the direction of the corridor step is significantly less attacker-friendly here than on Icebox, where you can hug the close left and scale with partial coverage towards site. Moving on to mid, this is one of the more debatable abstractions. While many would compare it to the similarly forked mid of Haven, I choose to compare it most directly to Split. You have 2 points of access for attackers, a central obstruction that facilitates attackers scaling to a right side pocket that's obstructed from one of the defending sight lines, and 2 points of egress that rather than giving site or exec space access, transition into intermediate space. The major caveat here being that the sheer width of mid and the harshness of the defender's side bottlenecks makes it vastly more attacker-sided than Split. Going through mid, we hit art. This is one that I think some teams have gotten right, but most teams have gotten very, very wrong. I've seen it compared to Garage on Haven, the ramp to A Heaven transition on Split, but I want us to first flip it horizontally and then head to bind showers. We have a tight entrance bottleneck, a hard clear defensive wrap position that can be supported by a secondary defender, and finally, a second bottleneck followed by a 90-degree defensive LOS that's supplemented by yet another deep defender LOS. Closing out the last of our intermediate spaces, we come to A-Long. For our abstraction here, we're going to reverse it, and then pull up Haven A-Long. Obviously, with the U-shape of Perl's long, the comparison is far from perfect, but to draw the parallel, let's look at the key defensive LOS from barriers and isolate that portion. You have a jump-spottable attacker side position with a crossover to soft coverage, a primary corridor with minimal single-sided coverage, and finally, an extended site-side final approach. Considering it this way, the comparison starts to make substantially more sense. That said, the key caveat remains that there's a significant amount of space the attackers have to scale through to get to this point, and depending on their proactivity at the start of the rounds, defenders can create a situation where you essentially have back-to-back Haven A-Longs. Now with our intermediate spaces mapped, let's move on to exec space and rotational corridors. I said we'd loop back to it, and here we are again with belong, but now it's for exec space, and it'll be diverging significantly from Icebox, which we compared it to before. The openness of the long side of sight creates an offsite postplant opportunity that compares much more accurately to bind B long, with a left side hard clear at screens akin to bind's elbow, your close right becoming similar to under hookah, pillar becoming similar to the right side of tube, and U-haul parring to back sight. Moving to the exec from B link, you have an immediate close left clear, a further back soft wall defender position on your left, dual verticality defender positions on your right, and those are all supplemented by an additional deep LOS. Position for position, this has an extremely close dynamic to none other than a Sense B main. You have lane close left clear, soft wall position at switch, dual verticality right side with logs and market, and a deep line with stairs and or CT. Now covering the main cluster of rotational corridors, we have the other side of the coin to the fact that Pearl's mid is so attacker favored. The defenders are given a spawn accessible 3-point rotation into either link. Another of the more arguable abstractions, I par this most closely to Breeze's middle. Spawn access to 2 links, as well as some long haul deep flank options, the key differentiator being that attackers are nearly completely unable to disrupt these rotations compared to Breeze, but that's to be expected as the defender's compensations for Pearl's mid. While there's a good chance this analogy doesn't make a lot of sense right now, it will become a lot clearer with further installments of this series as we sort of hash out its overall place in the map's dynamic. Wrapping up exec space, we have the 2 entrances to A site, starting with A link. We have a close left tuck to defender position, a right side open pinchable space, a setback rat position behind a soft wall in dugout, and a close left point of defender ingress. The main feature that our analog is missing is the second corridor for defender rotation. Any guesses? What if I flip it? Still nothing? It's an astonishing close mirror of the garage entry to Haven C. You enter through an extended bottleneck, have an open left-sided space that requires a clear, a right-side soft defender position with partial coverage, a setback defender position with varying levels of coverage and plat and back plat, and a same-side entrance for rotating defenders. Add a corridor into back plat, and they would be extraordinarily similar. Next, we have the exec space from A main. For this, the features include an extended entry bottleneck, a close right clear, a staggered left side clear, a center side obstruction that creates a functionally split site and offers defender swings from either side, and lastly, 2 deep defender lines. Compare this to Haven's A long, and you have almost all the same characteristics. The key differences: the defensive spawn rotation on Haven is obstructed, and instead of having Heaven and Hell as Haven does, Pearl has Secret and Dugout. At this point, the map is really starting to take shape, and we only have 3 things left to cover. Starting with the defender equivalent of exec space for retakes, we're back to B site. We have a high-low bottlenecked entrance that walks into a natural triangular hold with a deep 4th line available. This is a near spot-on copy to the retake for Haven A. Exceptions being Pearl's Heaven being at a different angle, Pearl's U-haul making it so that our graffiti equivalent could push through to short if we were on Haven, and that Pearl's equivalent to Hell is pinchable. On B, by comparison, we have 2 retake corridors and 2 offsite postplant options for attackers. This is strikingly similar to Fracture B. Features that are missing are the clear absence of Fracture's B main, and the lack of tower tying our offsite corridors together. At long last, we come to our final item, a 4-channel attacker spawn with staggered mid-access. This is very simply Haven attacker spawn, with one major difference. The cross-map rotation from peaking A long to peaking B long is almost twice as long on Pearl comparing Haven's A to C long. From 7 to 9 seconds on Haven to north of 15 seconds on Pearl. So here's our new look. We now have an abstracted map that allows us to blend other maps' context and some known exceptions to determine what sites will be better or worse to hit and retake, how we can scale most favorably, and eventually what specific agents and utility will mesh best to meet all of our needs therein. That'll about wrap us up for this first installment. Fortunately, this is the driest one out of the way. It was sort of the groundwork and the stage setting that had to get done, just so that moving forward, everything will move a little bit more smoothly. When we start going into agents and utility and scaling patterns, be able to harken back and say, oh, well, we just abstracted this area of the map to this other map, so we expect Y and Z to work really efficiently. Everything will be a lot more fluid and will make a lot more sense. But sort of in that vein, where we are going to be moving more towards agents and utility in the next segment of this series, I wanted to ask anybody, based off of what we put into this video, our new abstracted map, there are already some pretty blatant flags of nobody's really approaching that section of the map this way based off of how they've designed their comps. I want to see if anyone can hit the nail on the head as to where they think compositionally I'm going to take this. In addition to that, wanted to wish everyone an absolute blast watching Champs tomorrow, if that's what you're doing. Sure as hell what I'm going to be doing. Also wanted to give a big thank you to my YouTube members, Colin Torbis, as well as Hick Messiah. And thank you, as always, for watching. And I'll see you in the next one.